Very good morning. You're watching News 9. I'm Karthik Malhotra. The Indian market staged a fantastic bounce back yesterday, but will the momentum continue even in the wake of Trump tariffs? And talking about tariffs, well, tariff everywhere, not a threat but real. What is India's strategy to counter Trump's reciprocal tariffs? That's what we are discussing on the show today. Joining me today will be a very special guest, the founder of GTRI, Ajay Srivastav. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. First up, a look at the headlines. Indian stock market stage a comeback, ends the 10-day losing streak with Sensex gaining 740 points, Nifty up almost 250 points. Will this momentum continue? We'll get to know once the market opens at 9:15 a.m. And there's a new clause in the new income tax bill. The taxman can legally break into your email and social media. What does this mean for you and for the taxman? We'll discuss on the show. Tariff everywhere. US tariffs headline at Trump's congressional address. What is India's strategy to offset potential impact on business and trade? We'll discuss on the show. Meanwhile, Commerce Minister PIYUSH GOYAL is set to return from Washington today. There have been talks, but no official statement yet. What should we make of discussions between PIYUSH GOYAL and his counterpart, Howard Ludwig? And in the wake of reciprocal tariffs, India's smartphone exports could be under threat. Remember, Apple continues to export iPhones from India. $8 to $9 billion worth of iPhones were expected to be shipped out of India to the US this year. Will that come under threat? Tesla has meanwhile rented a 4,000 square foot showroom space in Mumbai's Bandra Kurla complex. 35 lakh rupees a month as rental. And with Tesla staging an entry into India, is it time for India to rethink its EV policy, especially in the wake of tariffs? We'll try and get you answers to that. India's infrastructure and aerospace maker Larsen & Toubro L&T enters the aerospace industry with rocket and satellite segments to be manufactured in India. And China is eyeing a 5% growth in its GDP. Defense budget is up 7.2% to almost $250 billion. Let's start with the top story we're tracking today, with US President Donald Trump's threat of reciprocal tariffs stoking fears of a global trade war. India is looking at finding an amicable solution to the challenge under the broader framework of a trade deal with Washington. In his latest salvo yesterday, the US President, while addressing a joint session of the Congress, mentioned India alongside the European Union, China and Canada for charging higher tariffs on American products.
You don't make your product in America, however, under the Trump administration, you will pay a tariff, and in some cases, a rather large one. Other countries have used tariffs against us for decades, and now it's our turn to start using them against those other countries. On average, the European Union, China, Brazil, India, Mexico, and Canada, have you heard of them? And countless other nations charge us tremendously higher tariffs than we charge them. It's very unfair. India charges us auto tariffs higher than 100%. China's average tariff on our products is twice what we charge them. And South Korea's average tariff is 4 times higher. Think of that, 4 times higher. And we give so much help militarily and in so many other ways to South Korea. But that's what happens. This is happening by friend and foe. This system is not fair to the United States and never was. And so on April 2nd, I wanted to make it April 1st, but I didn't want to be accused of April Fool's Day. That's not, just one day cost us a lot of money. But we're going to do it in April. I'm a very superstitious person. April 2nd, reciprocal tariffs kick in. And whatever they tariff us, other countries, we will tariff them. That's reciprocal, back and forth. Whatever they tax us, we will tax them.
All right, so 2nd of April is when reciprocal tariffs kick in. Now remember, during his visit to Washington, D.C. on February 13th, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Donald Trump agreed to negotiate a mega trade deal by the end of this year and had set an ambitious target of $500 billion in annual trade by 2030. Meanwhile, India's Commerce Minister PIYUSH GOYAL is in Washington to talk to his American counterpart Howard Lutnick and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer on proposed deals. There is expectation in New Delhi that it may escape the reciprocal tariff being imposed by the Trump administration. But as per media reports early morning, quoting sources, US is unlikely to back down or even push the date further. Remember, there is no official statement yet from the Ministry of Commerce and Industry or a tweet from Minister PIYUSH GOYAL on what transpired in his talks in the US. Now, India has already announced lower tariffs on bourbon whiskey, wines, as well as EV components. Washington is also pushing New Delhi to buy more American oil, gas, and military platforms to bring down the US-India trade deficit that stands at around $45 billion in India's favor. Now, the US was the largest trading partner of India, with the overall bilateral trade in goods and services amounting to around $190 billion in the calendar year 2023. Now, that number is slated to increase, like I told you, to about $500 billion in the next 5 years. Now, Trump's policy on India has triggered global concerns and stoked fears of larger trade wars. His 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico have come into effect already. In addition, the US president has also doubled the 10% tariff he announced on Chinese imports in February, which now stands at 20%. But China is not taking it lying down. The Chinese embassy in the US has responded to the tariff imposed by the Trump administration over the fentanyl issue. And in a statement posted on X, the embassy emphasized that US should engage in equal consultation with China to address the matter. And strong statement coming out on that tweet by the Chinese embassy in the US, which says, if the US truly wants to solve the fentanyl issue, then the right thing to do is to consult with China by treating each other as equals. And goes on to say, if war is what the US wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we are ready to fight till the end. That is what the Chinese embassy posted on X. Now, joining us to discuss what these trade tariffs, trade wars mean for the world, and more so what they mean for India, is a very special guest this morning, the founder of GTRI, Mr. Ajit Srivastav. Mr. Srivastav, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's first begin with the most obvious sectors that we know are likely to get impacted in this tariff war that Donald Trump is waging on. First one being the pharma sector. India's pharmaceutical sector has exports of over $10 billion. Then you've got precious stones exported to the US contributing to about $7.6 billion, machinery and equipment standing at about $6.1 billion. So, Mr. Srivastav, let me first begin by asking you the impact on India's pharma sector. How big a dent is that likely to be?
Good morning, Karthik, and good morning, viewers. Before starting, I want to say this is not about high tariffs alone.
Okay.
Otherwise, US is having an FTA with Mexico and Canada since 1994. It was earlier called NAFTA and then called USMCA in 2019.
That's right.
They were having zero tariff trade for the past more than 30 years now. But still, Mr. Trump has gone ahead and imposed tariffs on them. So it's not about tariffs. They were having zero tariff trade. So Canada and Mexico, they were not imposing higher tariffs. It was zero tariff trade. So it's just he's using threat of tariff to extract more concessions. Else, we can also see why he's threatening European Union. They have comparable tariff to the US. So tariffs are not an issue. He is using high tariff as an alibi to extract concessions from his trade partners. So now with that I answer. So the correct answer would be that we don't know. In fact, Mr. Trump's team also is not clear how they are going to impose the tariffs. Are they going to impose one tariff on the country? For example, they say 20% on China, 25% on Mexico. That means no sectoral changes will be there. Every sector, every product will be hit by one singular tariff, 20%, 10%, something like that.
But Mr. Srivastav, if I can just cut you short there, that seems to be the case with Mexico and Canada. That doesn't really seem to be the case with India, because here you're not talking about one blanket tariff. What Donald Trump is saying is that it is going to be reciprocal tariffs. So whatever India charges the US, I believe from a sectoral perspective, is what the US will want to try and slap onto India.
Sure. So Siddharth, Karthik, before answering to your question,
Sir,
I would like to say this, that if reciprocal tariffs, they are worked out at the product level, they are not going to work. For example, US exports apples to India and we charge 50% tariffs on US apples. And Mr. Trump says, okay, you are charging 50%, I'll also charge 50% apples from India. We say, go ahead, please, we don't export apples to you. That applies to most of the export items. But having said this, we have analyzed the sectoral impact at the product level, sector level, and in the pharma sector. Now, to answer your precise questions, if he is applying tariffs at the sectoral levels, for example, he applies one single tariff on the pharma sector. Pharma, we export about $12 billion worth of generics mostly to US,
right.
And half the generics into US are coming from India, and 90% of the prescriptions prepared in the US hospitals, they use generics. So the number is less. So US total pharma imports is $212 billion
right.
in the last year. So our export is only $12 billion. But in terms of impact, it's much larger impact. So if they hurt us with tariffs, we charge about 7.5% on pharma.
Okay.
If they charge the reciprocal tariff, say 7.5% on us, and our tariffs decrease, where from they are going to buy the generics? They don't
right.
have options. Even China supplies half the generics we supply to them.
Right.
They buy mostly patented drugs. So if they apply tariffs on pharma, our pharma may be expensive, but the exports will not decline for the reason that pharma sector says that their tie-up with the US importers is that they will allow Indian firms to charge a particular price.
Right.
All the import charges will be borne by the US side. So whatever tariffs are increased, I think there will be no impact on the pharma sector.
All right, no impact on the pharma sector. Let's move to two new and rather surprising sectors which are now voicing concerns. The first being, of course, the 100% tariff on agriculture exports. So, US was India's largest importer of agri products at $5.7 billion in FY 21-22. So, agriculture sector is a new sector which has been mentioned by Trump, and there's likely to be a 100% tariff on India's agri exports. But that may still, like you gave the Apple example, Mr. Srivastav, that may still not really be as much of a dent. But the sectors which are voicing concerns now seem to be the smartphones and wearables and the electronics industry, where India now charges a 16.5% duty on electronic components. Now, India is expected to export about $8 billion worth of iPhones to the US this year. And we are also seeing what we are referring to as Apple's Ghar Wapsi with a US investment of $500 million. So for India's electronics market, which is one of the only sort of success stories we've seen in recent times when it comes to manufacturing and making in India, is that likely to get impacted, to your opinion, sir?
Karthik, let's understand this in a cool fashion, because certain point of views are being emanated by vested interest. Here we have to understand. So iPhone, US doesn't make iPhone. Apple owns the IPR and they get half the money. So $1,000 worth of an Apple iPhone piece, it gets more than $450. That's fine. Okay, but it doesn't assemble. Assembling is done in China and now in India in a bigger way. Okay, so suppose they are imposing tariffs of 20% on China. More and more assembly operations are likely to be shifting to India. So India should gain. Now you talk about, and US will have nothing to do because exports from India. So suppose $1,000 piece of iPhone exported to US, $450 Apple gets. what India gets less than $30 of this. So US should have no worries on the iPhone account. Now you talk about the components. US doesn't make component. They should not worry about the component.
All right.
Component, we have about more than 20 electronic associations which deal with all these issues.
Right.
One or two associations, they don't miss any opportunity to force the government, to push the government to cut tariffs on the components. Be it any budget, they will say cut duties on the component. Government does also, but that harms our fast developing component ecosystem. For example, we in the past 5 years since the implementation of the PLI scheme, as you rightly mentioned, the export data, it's more than $16 billion. And we have hundreds of firms who are making parts of the mobile phone components. If we keep on cutting component tariffs every year, then that component system, which is in nascent stage, weak stage, it will get destroyed. So our aim should be to strengthen that ecosystem. And one more reason for doing this is, it's the most successful policy, as you rightly said. It's the most successful PLI scheme. Our production of a smartphone has gone from nearly 5 years back to $50 billion domestic production. So that means policies at whatever level, whatever tariffs, they are working very fine. And here there is absolutely no angle there is no US angle. US cannot assemble a smartphone. Their labor charges are very high. Right. And if China's tariffs are higher than India's tariffs, we will discover on 2nd April, more and more assembly of iPhone is likely to be shifting to India. We should just quietly enjoy for this sector without disturbing the policy parameters.
All right. Good, important news and a good headline that you're giving us, Mr. Srivastav, this morning, that there is going to be absolutely no negative impact. In fact, if anything, a positive impact with more assembly of electronics shifting to India, and tariff threats are not likely to impact India's now fairly well settled and still growing electronics manufacturing sector. I want to shift focus quickly to cars and especially electric vehicles. Now, from what we are hearing is that US is pushing for zero tariff on car imports in India and wants to deal with India in the EV space, in the automobile space. Right now, India's tariffs on fully built units are over 100%. Even the it's not just the components, but even when you look at the semi built up or the entire auto sector per se, there seems to be some sort of difference between what the world expects India to charge and what India is charging. In the wake of this tariff threat and the imposition of reciprocal tariffs, I understand India doesn't export too many automobiles to the US, but do you think India is likely to change its EV policy or its automobile tariff policy to attract more US investments or brands coming into India?
So our domestic automobile industry is very competitive, and I want to say that India is charging higher duties, but all other countries, including the US, European Union, everybody has very high non-tariff barriers. Right. So it's very difficult to export cars, even if you are making globally competitive cars. It's very difficult. Our tariffs are visible. Having said that, if we cut the tariffs to, say, we lower the tariffs on cars, I don't think it's going to hurt our car sector because cars from US or the world over, we look at our high tariffs, 100%, 125%. What is happening at the field level? We must know this. We are seeing a lot of BMWs and Mercedes in Indian roads. They don't come to India paying 100% tariffs. They are imported into India at the CKD, completely knocked down condition. The parts and component, they come here, they are being assembled here and then exported here. So still parts and components are being imported at 15% tariffs. So 100%, of course, they can import, they can sell us the completely built car, but they have the options, and all the good companies are using that option, 15%. So even if we say cut tariff from 100 to 15%, I don't think much difference will be there on exports from the US. Of course, if we do this from imports from Japan or South Korea, they may shut their operations in India and go back and start exporting those things from there. But from US, I don't see much problems.
All right, not much problems from the US. And again, an interesting observation there, Mr. Srivastav, that by changing the auto policy, we may actually end up losing investments from Japanese automakers, even if we want to favor American automakers. Well, let's leave it at that this morning, Mr. Srivastav. Thank you so much for taking time out and putting into context this tariff war, trade war, and the fears that are being cited in India and by the industry. Thank you very much for joining us. Well, moving on to another interesting development that came in late last night. Tesla has finally rented a 4,000 square foot space in Mumbai's Bandra Kurla Complex Business District to house its maiden showroom in India. Now, the Elon Musk promoted company will be paying a rent of 35 lakh rupees per month for the space, which comes with some parking lots as well as documents shared by CRE Matrix. Now, the launch of Tesla in India is keenly awaited and may well be a precursor to the pioneering auto company's eventual plans to move manufacturing or at least assembly to India. Now, the lease for the space in Maker Max City is for a period of 5 years, and monthly rental will go up to nearly 43 lakh rupees a month with a 5% rent escalation per year. Now, the property on the ground floor at Mumbai's BKC is located very close to India's first Apple store and has been leased from Univico Properties. A rental agreement was registered between Univico and one of Tesla's arms having its offices in Pune on the 27th of February. The monthly rent per square foot works out to about 881 rupees as the starting rent, and security deposit of 2.1 crore rupees has been paid. Well, time for a quick break, but coming up on the other side, we'll get you the mood check as Indian stock markets open, and another important development coming in by way of the new income tax bill, where the taxman could have access to your social media, your email, and all your private fintech apps as well. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. These stories on the other side.
It's no more the days where people would have known the names of women cricketers. Now they know the faces of women cricketers.
Young girls are no more ignorant about, okay, the sport is only for boys or only for my brother.
When it comes to women, a very, very focused approach should be there to create an ecosystem for producing champions.
That's where we educate them. That's where the school has to say, when it comes to sport, there is no boys and girls. And that is where we have to set us that sort of environment.
It has to be more inclusive, equality has to be there, and it has to be based on merit.
It will only grow from strength to strength.
I'm an eternal optimist. With Mithalis around us, I'm sure that kind of change in mindset and that kind of encouragement for women to get into sports would definitely be far more prevalent.
We are all dependent on each other.
You can win and you will win.
Watch Do a Lot with Varun Das this Women's Day on the 8th of March, featuring Mithali Raj, only on NEWS9. NEWS9, English news as it should be.
मैं और आप, हम अलग कहाँ हैं?
Gill on 199.
अपनी अपनी मंजिल पर हम दोनों की नजर है और उसके लिए हम जी जान लगाकर मेहनत करते हैं। पर कभी कभी
He's out on 199.
मेहनत और मंजिल के बीच रह जाता है एक फासला। खैर, मुझे उस फासले को मिटाने के लिए थोड़ी और मेहनत लगेगी, पर शुक्र है आपके पास है टाटा कैपिटल, जो मिटाए फासले आपकी मेहनत और मंजिल के बीच। टाटा कैपिटल, मिटाए फासले।
For an India that's chasing its dreams, this is the drive of your dreams. Introducing the all-new Skoda Kailak. Own your dream.
Skoda.
Every brand tells a story. And they are the storytellers, the Sutradhars, They present a brand with band, baja and barat to you. They are the Brandwalas.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. Remember, the stock markets ended their 10-day losing streak yesterday, and it looks like the countdown to the losing streak has now turned into a count up to a winning streak as markets open with a positive beginning this morning. Remember, yesterday the Sensex ended about 740 points up. The Nifty was up about 250 points, and this morning again a 0.5% increase or so in both the benchmark indices. Nifty 50 now trading at 22,450 levels, while the Sensex is comfortably above the 74,000 levels, which was evading the benchmark index for a period of the entire last 10 days or so until yesterday. There is massive recovery even in the small cap space. The small caps, which were the hardest hit by way of the initiation of what many thought was a bear run. Well, we are seeing a massive recovery in that. 1.5% up. The small cap 100 index, it's up at about 15,430. So what really drove the sentiment yesterday was perhaps investors discovering what they felt was the rock bottom for prices to be picked up. Well, we never really know in the markets what the rock bottom is, but we saw buying activity yesterday, as well as some foreign cues coming in, with Asian markets all reacting positively in spite of the tariff talks that were reiterated by Donald Trump yesterday in the US Congressional Assembly. Well, let's look at the sectors and some of the stocks on the Nifty 50 heat map this morning and get a sense of how the sectors are facing today. Well, it looks like a mixed bag, even though there is an upward swing in the small cap, mid cap, broader space, as well as in the benchmark indices. The banking sector not looking too good this morning. HDFC Bank being one of the exceptions, which was in fact one of the only stocks which was down yesterday. Today staging a recovery up about 0.25 percentage point. ICICI Bank, Kotak Mahindra Bank, as well as SBI all in the red this morning. Well, even Bharti Airtel is down about 1% today. Remember, this was also a stock which had seen an upsurge yesterday. A mixed bag coming in from the auto space, where Mahindra & Mahindra seems to be one bright spot this morning, up almost 1% already in the first 6 or 7 minutes of trading, and Tata Motors is up about 0.8%. Maruti Suzuki in the red this morning. Mixed bag again on the tech front. Remember, IT companies had a solid trading session yesterday. That doesn't seem to be the case today, with the Infi pretty much recouping all the gains that were made yesterday. It's down almost 0.9%. TCS also taking a slight beating at about 0.2%. So, well, this is the Nifty heat map. Just look at the mixed bag of action that we are seeing. And as we are talking, slight change in the mood of the market. Well, now the Nifty 50 is pretty much looking at some sell-off, early gains being traded this morning. It started up about 0.5%. It's now up just about 0.2%. And the Sensex has fallen below the 74,000 mark. So, well, volatility seems to be the nature of the markets this morning, and that is what we can see. The volatility index, India VIX, is also up 0.4%. So, early gains for the market, but market losing some steam as the day progresses. And moving on to another developing story, and this comes by way of the new income tax bill, which was tabled by Finance Minister last month. And the new feature in this income tax bill is that the tax authorities can now legally hack into your personal accounts, your emails, your social media, you name it. On April 1st, 2026, next year, as the new financial year begins, FY 26-27, there will be a new income tax law in place. Now, among the much talked about simplification of the language of the old income tax bill and ease of tax filing, the Income Tax Department will have the power to access digital information of individuals who they suspect of tax evasion. Well, you would think there's nothing new about that, right? Well, not really. The taxman or woman, as the case may be, will have the legal authority to access your personal social media accounts, your personal bank accounts, emails, and other fintech or online investment platforms that you use for your trading or investments. Now, this new feature comes under clause 247 of the income tax bill, which gives the power to the government and increases the capability of government agencies to investigate deeper. So, what does the change in the law exactly say? Well, let's compare it with the existing law. The existing law, section 132 of the current Income Tax Act of 1961, gives liberty to income tax officers to search and seize premises if they are under the impression that a person is trying to hide financial documents or hidden income. It also allows them to break locks if needed. But in changing times and traditional transactions making way for digital ones, the new income tax bill is expanding the scope by providing tax officials the power to gain entry into personal and financial data stored digitally. So which platforms and servers come under the new bill? Well, let's try and decode that for you. First, of course, is your email servers, which means that server level access will be granted to the IT authorities to go ahead and dig out any email, a personal email that could have some sensitive information. But that's not all. There's also social media accounts. So your social media accounts, which you thought were absolutely private and you could restrict who sees and who doesn't see what you post on social media, is something that the new income tax bill will challenge, and the tax authorities will be able to break into your social media accounts and get an understanding of what you're up to socially. In addition to that, there is the online banking, trading and investment platforms. Now, these platforms, what we refer to as fintech or bank tech platforms, these platforms can be logged into by the IT authorities and your data can be pulled from there. Then, of course, there are websites which are storing asset ownership details, and this perhaps could be the crypto exchanges and other websites that are used for any sort of illegal activities, which may include gambling or betting. These could also be now viewed in detail by the income tax authorities. Then, of course, cloud storage and remote servers. The income tax department will have access to all those, as well as digital application platforms. So it basically means that if the tax officials believe that someone has committed tax fraud or tax evasion, then they don't need that person's consent to break into these digital platforms. Now, who are the eligible authorized ones who will have access to your digital platforms? And that is something which is absolutely important to understand in the context of scams and other notorious activities that take place digitally. Well, the new income tax law will give the authority only to tax officials. Now, this includes joint directors and additional directors. It will include joint commissioners and additional commissioners, assistant directors and deputy directors, assistant commissioners, as well as deputy commissioners. Now, any of these officials, if they suspect an individual is evading taxes or has undisclosed income, then the law gives authority to any of these officials to override digital security measures to gain access to the personal data of an individual. Now, there are certain questions that get raised, and the first question is about the breach of privacy and legal obstacles. Now, that's something that perhaps could be contested under Article 21 of the Constitution of India, under the fundamental right to life and personal liberty. The excessive power given to the officials do raise eyebrows when it comes to the right to privacy and the possibility of misusing that power. The intent of the law may well be to catch tax evaders, but how will the government ensure that this is not abused? Well, we will leave you with those questions to ponder over. India's infrastructure major Larsen & Toubro, or L&T, has said it is betting on aerospace as a potential growth engine, including launch vehicles and satellite manufacturing, as India cuts reliance on imports and boosts private participation. More details in this report.
India's government wants the country to become a leading space power. It's expanded its rocket and satellite industries and also seen the country cut reliance on imports and boost private participation. It's got local firms like industrial giant Larsen and Toubro, or L&T, betting on aerospace as a potential growth engine. Aaron Ramchandani is a senior vice president at L&T.
So there is a whole space economy which is opening up, and as L&T we are looking at how we can leverage our legacy, our heritage in this to the future requirements of this segment.
At a factory in southern India, the company is assembling the country's first privately built polar satellite launch vehicle. Its launch is expected to occur by mid-year, though an exact date has not yet been decided. The company is also building equipment for other deep space exploration programs led by India's National Space Agency, the ISRO.
The PSLV is one example where we are working along with ISRO and industrializing it, making it something that can be produced at commercial scale, where we can provide launch services on demand, where we are able to deliver payload capacity as the market demands.
Indian authorities hope eased regulations will attract global players. They've set a target of reaching $44 billion for the country's commercial space sector in that time. The sector is currently valued at $13 billion, according to a leading research firm.
Well, moving on, the Reserve Bank of India has said it will infuse 2,100 crore rupees in liquidity into the Indian banking system in a bid to ease lending conditions and boost economic growth. Now, RBI, it says, and this is a quote from the RBI statement, RBI will continue to monitor evolving liquidity and market conditions and take measures to, as appropriate, to ensure orderly liquidity conditions. This is what the RBI said in a press release. Now, as part of the measures, the RBI will conduct 2 open market operations, or OMOs, totaling 1 lakh crore rupees on March 12th and March 18th. It will also conduct a dollar-rupee buy-sell swap on March 24th. Now, liquidity conditions have been tight since mid-December, largely due to tax outflows, dollar sales by the RBI in the foreign exchange market to stabilize the rupee, and lower than expected government spending, especially on capex programs. The central bank cut interest rates by 25 basis points last month, and comfortable liquidity conditions typically help in better pass-through of loan rates, ensure policy transmission, and push economic growth. Now, remember, India's economy expanded by 6.2% in the October to December Q3, picking up on increased government and consumer spending. Now, post the infusion by RBI, core liquidity, taking into account banking system liquidity along with government cash balances, will remain what the RBI says in a comfortable surplus of 1.6 lakh crore rupees by March end. Now, the RBI has already infused over 4.5 lakh crore rupees into the banking system since the middle of January this year. This includes 1.4 lakh crore rupees of bond purchases, around 1.3 lakh crore rupees through foreign exchange swaps, and 1.8 lakh crore rupees of early April maturity repo auctions. And let's move on to some global headlines making news this morning. The United States Supreme Court is refusing to block the $2 billion aid by the US. This comes as a contest to Trump's America First policy. And US is likely to stop sharing, or at least reduce sharing, intelligence with Ukraine. And as Donald Trump continues to go ahead with the tariff threats and converting those into action, especially on Mexico and Canada, Mexico fears inflation, which could also lead to job losses in the country. And Mexico is not alone. Even Canada is fearing rising costs in the wake of Trump tariffs. Remember, the tariffs on the automobile sector have been deferred by a month, but all other tariffs on Mexico and Canada at 25% have been implemented by the US. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says that Canada has felt insulted and is angry with US policy, asks Canadian citizens to not drink US bourbon and also boo the US national anthem. Meanwhile, a taboo on holding diplomatic talks with Hamas have been broken by the US as it has held the first level of talks, potentially looking at pressuring Israel with launching phase 2 of the ceasefire. Meanwhile, despite Trump tariffs, Wall Street ended higher, and the optimism of investors likely coming in from the possibility of some sort of a truce between US and China on trade wars. Like we told you, the United States has pushed or rather deferred the auto tariffs by a month, a sigh of relief, perhaps a temporary one for both Canada and Mexico. Meanwhile, China is eyeing a 5% growth in the next financial year. Its defense budget is up 7.2% to $250 billion. Meanwhile, volatility in the Indian markets is high. Remember, just a few minutes back, we told you that perhaps you're looking at a run up or a count up to winning days on the Lal Street, but that doesn't seem to be the case this morning. Nifty and Sensex that both started up about 0.5% in about 10 minutes of trading, came to just about 0.2% up, are now down. Nifty 50 and Sensex both down about 0.1%. Sensex is below the 74,000 mark. Nifty 50 at about 22,322. India Wix, which was up just in decimal points this morning, is now up about 2.6% at about 14 or so. Small cap, mid cap space holding well, at least in early trade. We don't know how the trading scene is going to develop over the next few hours as the market is open, but benchmark indices, which saw hefty gains yesterday, not living up to that momentum, and it looks like selling and profit booking is the name of the game this morning. Well, time for a quick break now, but coming up on the other side, all the global stories in news today. You're watching Morning Brief at 9 right here on NEWS9.
मैं और आप एक जैसे ही तो हैं। एक बार मंजिल दिख जाए,
One shot of a century,
तो उसे पाने के लिए हम अपने कदमों को नहीं रोकते।
that looks out.
पर कभी कभी मेहनत और मंजिल के बीच रह जाता है एक फासला। खैर, मुझे उस फासले को मिटाने के लिए थोड़ी और मेहनत लगेगी, पर शुक्र है आपके पास है टाटा कैपिटल, जो मिटाए फासले आपकी मेहनत और मंजिल के बीच। टाटा कैपिटल, मिटाए फासले।
What does it take to be the greatest in the world? Perseverance, dedication, self-confidence. But there is one thing which truly sets you apart. Your inner strength. Sodium TMT Rebar. True inner strength.
Light, camera, and action. Kick back, relax, grab your favorite snack because NEWS9 is here with your weekend dose of entertainment. It's time to take a deeper dive into the buzzworthy happenings of the entertainment world. From celebrity gossips to exclusive conversations, from nostalgic moments to NEWS9's pick of the week, don't worry, we've got you covered here. And I hope you've grabbed your popcorn by now because NEWS9's page 3 is here to serve you everything that we call entertainment. So do stay tuned every Saturday and Sunday, 2:30 p.m.
There were two roles that you played, right? One is that of an angel investor. One is that of a good wife.
I told Murthy, you work hard and made money. I worked hard to spend that money.
Mr. Murthy has often talked about your credentials. He said that you are better in all aspects.
You should work and fail, than regret.
I think we are not nurturing and leveraging 50% of our strength, which are the women.
For an educated lady, even today, the problem comes when she becomes a mother.
You are an exceptional combination of a left brain and a right brain, which is very rare.
I'm a positive thinking person.
We all idealize Ma Durga, who is also known as Dash Puja.
After all, we are a product of the history.
Suppose if you had donned the seat of chairman, maybe by now Oxford or Cambridge would have had chairwoman as a legitimate English word and not a chairman.
Watch Duologue with Barun Das this Women's Day on the 8th of March, featuring Sudha Murthy, only on News9. News9, English news as it should be.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. Let's look at all the global stories in news this morning. Residents at Montreal in Canada are fearing rising costs, inflation, as new US tariffs add pressure, warning of a bigger hit to consumers. Experts have predicted the impact of these tariffs can severely affect the Canadian economy. From 12th of March onwards, US will impose tariffs on all steel and aluminum products, including products from Canada. And Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has asked citizens of Canada to avoid the US bourbon whiskey, fueling debate over trade tensions and Canada's response to tariffs. He's also asking Canadian citizens to boo the US national anthem, saying that the country feels insulted and angry. Let's listen in to what Justin Trudeau said.
We're going to choose to try to buy Canadian products and forego bourbon and other classic American products. And yeah, we're probably going to keep booing the American anthem. But let me tell Americans, we're not booing you. We're not booing your teams. We're not booing your players. We're booing a policy that is designed to hurt us. And we're insulted. And we're angry. But we're Canadian, which means we're going to stand up for each other. We're going to fight. And we're going to win.
All right, Canada saying it's optimistic of winning. Well, let's see how that plays out. But Canada is not alone, because businesses in Mexico are also preparing for economic challenges, as the new tariff sanction by the US has sparked fears of inflation that could potentially result in job losses in Mexico. But remember, US has deferred the tariff on automobiles by a month, but we'll come to that later. First, let's look at what the fears in Mexico are all about.
President Sheinbaum says her government will announce retaliatory measures on Sunday, with a public protest against the US measures in Mexico City. Mexico had hoped to avoid this.
Mexico's automotive industry creates 1.2 million jobs and a further 9 million indirect jobs servicing the sector. 87% of our manufacture output is destined for export, and 80% of that goes to the US. So we're talking about a serious problem.
But it's not only big business. Abraham Lopez, who runs Reach MX, a company specializing in imported goods from China, says the tariffs will inflate consumer prices.
Companies are not going to stop buying steel. People are not going to stop buying cars. I mean, it's going to take them longer to get them, but the world doesn't stop. And just pushing inflation for the lower and middle class even higher, I mean, it's already bad.
Well, you heard the employment fears in Mexico, especially over the auto industry, but there seems to be a temporary relief for automakers as yet, just as Trump has at least granted, to begin with, a 1-month hold on auto tariffs. Now, the looming uncertainty is engulfing the new trade policies, showcasing a negative side to the sector. Take a look.
U.S. President Donald Trump will exempt automakers from his punishing 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico for 1 month, as long as they comply with the terms of an existing free trade agreement. That's according to White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
The president is giving them an exemption for 1 month so they are not at an economic disadvantage. So the three companies that he spoke to are Stellantis, Ford, and General Motors. They requested the call, they made the ask, and the president is happy to do it. It's a 1 month exemption.
Auto stocks rose on the news. Trump is also open to hearing about other products that should be exempted from the tariffs, which took effect Tuesday, the White House said. The levies pose extreme difficulties for automakers, which produce vehicles in all three countries and often ship parts across North American borders multiple times as they get built up into systems and finished vehicles. Automakers have expressed support for boosting U.S. investment, but want certainty over tariff policies as well as on vehicle emissions rules, two industry sources told Reuters. Trump also might eliminate the 10% tariff on Canadian energy imports, such as crude oil and gasoline, a source familiar with the discussion said. The announcement came after a phone call in which Trump said on Truth Social he told Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that his country is not doing enough to stop fentanyl smuggling.
He said that he was not pleased, as you said. He said it's not good enough. He told Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that directly. The call ended in a somewhat friendly manner, as the president said, but he's not going to stop standing up for the American people.
Talks will continue between the two countries, Trudeau's office said. The tariffs could threaten to derail Canada's fledgling economic recovery and could trigger a recession, as the country relies on the United States for 75% of its exports and a third of all imports. Trade tensions may already be hurting the United States. New data released on Wednesday showed slowing payroll growth, as well as lower wage growth for workers who switch jobs, with uncertainty around Trump's policies a likely factor.
And let's move on to China now. The Chinese leadership has kicked off its annual parliamentary gathering. China has announced increased fiscal stimulus, prioritizing consumer spending and economic stability as trade tension with the US escalates. Now, Premier Li Qiang warned of growing global challenges, particularly in trade, science and technology. Now, to sustain its 5% growth target for 2025, Beijing has raised its budget deficit to 4% of the GDP, increased special treasury bonds to 1.3 trillion yuan, and allowed local governments to issue 4.4 trillion yuan in debt. Now, it also announced a 7.2% increase in its national defense budget, totaling to about $249 billion this year, amid its hectic efforts to modernize armed forces, including fast development of warships and new generation fighter jets. Now, a 500 billion yuan fund will also be used to recapitalize state banks. Consumer spending was emphasized as a key driver, with consumption mentioned 31 times in Li's report, surpassing the word technology. However, concrete household support remained limited aside from subsidies for electric vehicles and consumer appliances. Meanwhile, Chinese exporters face growing US tariffs, rising fears of price wars and new trade barriers. Washington recently added 10 percentage points to tariff, with further hikes expected. Tariffs between US and China now standing at 20%. China, in another statement on X, the Chinese embassy in the US had said that it is ready for any sort of war, be it a trade war or a tariff war with the US. But Wall Street surges as investors seem to be positive over easing trade tensions, fueling confidence in global markets with hopes for a resolution to the US-China trade war, boosting sentiment across the board. Take a look at how Wall Street fared yesterday.
Wall Street's main indexes finished higher in choppy trading on Wednesday, with the Dow and S&P 500 each adding more than 1% and the Nasdaq climbing nearly 1.5%. Stocks turned positive after a report said President Trump was considering a 1-month delay of auto tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Equities extended gains after a White House announcement confirmed the tariff delay on some vehicles. Ford closed up nearly 6%, while shares of General Motors rose more than 7%. Despite jitters over the potential effects of Trump's tariffs, Liz Miller, president of Summit Place Financial Advisors, said the economy's fundamentals remain strong.
We just came out of a good earnings season, over 15% year-over-year growth. We just got this morning services index up, not just as expected, but even stronger. Our service economy is strong. These are things that tell us an economy doesn't stall on a dime. We may see some side effects from tariffs. It may even slow our growth a little bit. But from our base case economy, I don't see high risks of recessions. I don't see a high risk at all of stalling GDP growth. I think we will see some balancing outcomes from this.
Other stocks on the move included chipmaker Intel, which dropped nearly 2.5% a day after Trump said that lawmakers should get rid of a law offering subsidies to the semiconductor industry. And CrowdStrike fell more than 6% after the cybersecurity firm forecast first quarter revenue slightly below estimates.
Well, that's all we have on the show this morning on Morning Brief at 9. Thank you very much for watching. But news continues right here on News 9, so don't go anywhere. Stay right here with us. Thank you.
I feel women are the strongest species.
I 100% agree with you. Humans are different. Our needs of each other are different.
If the world starts getting women-led, I think a lot of things will get corrected.
The men like you see this sort of inequity and injustice that's